Thank you for joining us. We are now about to begin our fireside chat on food security, a global challenge. Please feel free to enter questions in the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. The moderator will take them at the end if time permits. I will now hand things over to our moderator, Mercina Tillemann from the GBBC.
Thank you so much, Jack, and thank you, Bernhard and Claire, for being available for this conversation. We first met about a year ago, I think exactly, and I'm excited to get to the circumstances under which we were first acquainted last year. But just to kind of frame the conversation more generally, due to man-made conflicts, climate change, and economic crises, more than 250 million people are potentially at the brink of starvation, as predicted by the UN. These are kind of earth-shattering numbers. It is an incredible challenge, and I'm really grateful to have Claire Rhodes, CEO and co-founder of Producers Direct, and Bernhard Kowatsch, head of the UN World Food Program Innovation Accelerator, which sounds like just about the most interesting job I can imagine. Really, really happy to have both of you here to discuss this topic today. And just to start, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you do. So let's start with Claire and then Bernhard. What do you do daily? What is your job? And how is it relevant to this conversation?
Well, thank you so much. And it's fantastic to be part of this discussion today. So Producers Direct, we're an international network of smallholder farmers. So collectively, we work across 1 million smallholders working in East Africa and Latin America. And we're really focused on farmer-led solutions to the challenges that smallholders face. And of course, that's critical for global food hunger when you think about the fact that the majority of the world's food is sourced from smallholder farmers. And so with Producers Direct, we invest in pioneering farmer-led design and farmer-led solutions to essentially tackling food sustainability, climate change resilience for smallholders, and enabling smallholders ultimately to enhance their incomes. So on a day-to-day basis, it's less glamorous, especially at the moment when I'm not able to fly and actually meet the smallholders that we work with. But yes, we're a kind of international team with Producers Direct, and we really work on championing farmer leadership in everything we do.
Yeah, and then so my job, as you say, is working for the World Food Program, and in particular our Innovation Accelerator. So the World Food Program is the world's most effective organization, reaching about 100 million people in 83 countries, both in emergency response, so saving lives in emergencies. So whenever you hear about like the UN is providing food for Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, in South Sudan, in Colombia, like that's the World Food Program. But we also work with smallholder farmers and actually providing social safety nets. And like my day job is essentially to look for exciting, amazing startups, innovators, nonprofits that have the potential to help us end hunger. And this is also how, well, we met Claire and other blockchain innovation. Like this is where we see like that some of the exciting trends or sources of innovation could be either technology, such as blockchain, or great new business models. And this is how we came together.
Absolutely, yes. So just to set the stage, about a year ago, Bernhard, Claire, and about 100 other folks were gathered in New York at the New York City Blockchain Center at a hackathon that we hosted with Procter & Gamble, Microsoft, UN World Food Program, and others to identify blockchain innovations aimed at solving some of the sustainable development goals. And I just feel like this is kind of a fairy tale scenario because a year later, we are looking at one of the winners of that hackathon at Producers Direct. And we're here for a bit of a project update to understand why the World Food Program thought this was a helpful solution and how that process has evolved over the last year. And I know there are a lot of complicating factors in so many ways, we inhabit a world that is fundamentally different than the world we were living in a year ago. But I'd love to, I guess, start with Bernhard to understand what about Claire's solution was so innovative and compelling for you, given all of the different innovations that you're constantly interacting with. Why was Producers Direct compelling, and how do you identify the solutions which you think will actually help address the challenges you're hoping to meet?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. And I must say, generally speaking, when I'm attending hackathons or anything like that, I'm actually like, my expectation level at the beginning is always like, well, let's see what happens. And like, I'm not sure what's going to happen. When Claire and her team present at the hackathon, I was really like, wow. Like, you really did all of this in the last 24 hours. So I must say this was, I think, probably the best possible outcome, like, because what we're looking for in our case in particular is we're looking for these kind of disruptive technologies and startups that can help us make that step change towards zero hunger. And like, where, some people who are watching this now may think like, well, but why would you actually take blockchain? Then it's well, we believe that we need to ensure that everybody on this planet has the rights for safe food and healthy lives, which means that some of the most vulnerable people that are currently excluded from technology in some other aspects, they just like, how can we reach them? How can we enable smallholder farmers to get the market access that they deserve? And the solution, and Claire's solution in particular, was focusing on how might you use blockchain technology to support sustainable production of nutritious food and crops, and the diversification, so like a whole package, supporting smallholder farmers, like specifically female smallholder farmers, and help them aggregate this and get fair market price and market access through a blockchain technology. And now the aspect here which makes a big difference is like, it's not only about the technology, we're also looking for, okay, who is the team behind it? And so typically we're looking for innovations globally, actually, like, so everybody can apply on our website even without knowing each other, like on our website, innovation.wfp.org. But now, because Claire had built this, and like, clearly she had already traction in different countries with Producers Direct, that was really exciting for us to see, like, wow, maybe we can try this out in Peru.
Thank you so much. And I, like Bernhard, was totally blown away by your solution, Claire. I remember just feeling really humbled and impressed by the amount of work that you did, not just on the day of in those 24 hours, but leading up to that, in order to have kind of the perspective to bring such a thoughtful solution to the table. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your experience and what equipped you to identify this really impactful solution for different environments.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I think actually I was reflecting a bit on how the hackathon did come to be such a dream team. And I think what we accidentally combined, I think unwittingly, was so the expertise of David Acton, who is a blockchain guru. And I know nothing about blockchain. And so I kind of provided almost a voice of dissent when he was coming up with all these amazing ideas on how to use blockchain. To Bernhard's point, most smallholder farmers, they don't have access to the internet. They don't have access to a smartphone. A lot of the time they're marginalized from all of this innovation that's happening that could ultimately improve their livelihoods. And I think throughout the hackathon, I was constantly like, no, that's not going to work for smallholder farmers. No. And, that those two things together really combined to be a strong solution. So just to contextualize things a bit and talk a bit about what we've been doing. Key issues that, as Bernhard was saying, particularly for female smallholders. I think most people don't appreciate the role that female smallholders play in global food production. Generally, smallholder farmers, as I was saying, they're responsible for 70% of the world's food. 50% of them are women, and yet typically they're very marginalized in terms of access to bank accounts, access to technology. Very rarely will they be using a smartphone. and also access to markets. So a lot of the time, what we see is that female farmers, they are growing food to feed their families, and they have surplus food. But typically, if they are able to sell that, they're not capturing the value from that food. That's for two reasons. Firstly, a lot of the time it rots before they leave their farm to be able to sell it. But also they're selling individually at local markets if they are able to get the transport to the market. And what that means is that then they face the challenge that they are negotiating individually with buyers to actually sell the product, which really drives down the prices that they get. So often what we see is that female farmers sell their produce for less than it costs them to produce. And so what we were trying to do with our solution for the hackathon, digital cooperatives, is replicate the power that female farmers would get if they were able to aggregate and sell collectively, replicate that power digitally, and devise a blockchain solution to support that. And I think back to the point, what we're not saying is that female farmers have to have a smartphone and be completely savvy with the blockchain technology. We're designing based on their realities, their access to technology, their understanding of it, and then secondary linking that to a very sophisticated blockchain platform. So coming at it from a farmer-first perspective.
Thank you so much. And I think that's such a critical point. And it's really only when we break down these traditionally very siloed sectors that we can come up with solutions that meet the needs of the individuals who are going to be using them. You know, from my perspective as someone who lives in Washington, D.C. and has never been a farmer, I can only make up so much in terms of an effective solution. And it's really valuable to bring technologists together with policymakers and others who have on-the-ground experience to build these solutions. And I'm really keen to understand what the partnership with the World Food Program looks like and where you are in terms of the pilot that you've started now.
Thank you. So yes, I think what was a really fantastic opportunity was that we have really strong smallholder networks in Peru. And it's also an area where WFP, the Peru team, are really focusing on investing in female smallholders to diversify food crop production and enable kind of that food supply to be supporting feeding programs in local schools and other local markets for the food. And so coming together and partnering in Peru has been a fantastic opportunity. So far, we've been working as part of the Sprint program to identify user groups of female farmers to actually get them to design the prototype themselves and be involved in that process. We've been doing a lot of research to understand local realities, how much food female farmers have to sell, what the local prices are. And we've just now started to use to test the prototype with a lean methodology. And so working within the context of the current situation in Peru, where, as I'm sure you've been following, COVID is very challenging. We're sort of facing the added pressure that we're now trying to develop a user-centered design process when we can't actually meet our users face-to-face and they don't have access to smartphone technology. So that's been an extra challenge that we've been working to overcome. But we're just starting now to test the prototype. So we'll be, yes, working in two sites, one with the World Food Program in Peru at Situra, and then one where we've been working for a number of years with female farmers.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And how the pandemic has potentially changed the nature of your work. I know Claire mentioned not being able to travel to specific locations, but there are so many other issues exacerbating kind of what we try to do on a daily basis. And the issue of hunger has only become more pressing. And so I'd love to hear how the pandemic has forced you to pivot and reevaluate the way that you function and the Accelerator functions.
I mean, to start with the overall World Food Program perspective, like one of the I think sad and actually quite shocking aspects of COVID-19 are the socioeconomic effects that are happening in developing countries in particular. So it's not so much about the pandemic itself, but about border closures, social distancing rules, people no longer able to work. And if that was your daily income was your income and you have no savings, that has dramatic effects. So in a lot of countries, we now see people falling into acute hunger where we haven't seen this in decades, sometimes even. And so the sad thing is that the number of acutely hungry people is forecasted to rise from about 135 million people to maybe up to 270 million people globally because of COVID and those specific issues. And now, which also explains now, we as Accelerator, actually, we've been a lot more busy during COVID-19 than even before, specifically because we need innovations right now more than ever. It's actually what Claire's solution with smallholder farmers is prioritized as one of the things we have to do, because it will help us support vulnerable populations right now where social distancing is a problem or something that you need to address. Now, we as Accelerator, what we've done, we run this typically a 1-week training program that we call Innovation Bootcamp, with one of them planned just a week before the pandemic was officially announced. And by that time it was clear. So we actually, with 5 days before the event, we then, used to be an in-person event. We shifted that to a completely virtual facilitation. We already have 4 of those under our belt now, because we also run Accelerator programs for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for Primary Healthcare with UNICEF and WHO and a couple of other agencies. But then the aspect that actually is still working, and I'm usually referring to that as our secret superpower, which is actually our colleagues of the World Food Program in field locations. So we have 18,000 staff globally, which means that we are still able to test and to implement innovations on the ground in developing countries because we have colleagues there. And so that's why while we as Accelerator have shifted all our operations into a complete remote working mode, our colleagues on the ground still help us, and we're still implementing, and we're still actually seeing results of innovations that are necessary right now.
Very interesting. And I'm curious, actually, from both of your perspectives, the pandemic, in my view, has highlighted many of the underlying vulnerabilities and shortcomings of existing systems and processes. And I'm wondering if you have recognized a renewed or increased openness to innovating, whether on the part of governments or corporates or whoever the stakeholders that you're trying to engage are. Have you recognized increased openness and maybe appetite to embrace some of these solutions?
Yeah, I think just to come in on that, I can think of 3 big examples. The first is the digitization of information for farmers. A lot of the time, typically, farmers receive information still very much in person, and that's the case in Peru, where kind of innovation in agri-tech is relatively low compared to East Africa currently. But I think just more broadly, farmers reliant typically on agronomists and people going to visit their farms. All of that stopped overnight. And so there's been a massive emphasis on innovating to support the digitization of training and market access systems like the one that we've been working on. But also, I think, innovation, but collaboratively. And I think that has been a good opportunity that has been presented, that all of the different stakeholders who are working to support smallholders are looking at how to collaborate more effectively, given resources are limited, but also there's an urgency that has never been felt before to provide the support to smallholders. So I think that has been a benefit and an upside. The other area of innovation, I think, particularly in Peru, that's very interesting is we're seeing improvements in the uptake of digital financial services. Previously there had been a number of different tools in Peru to support digital payments, but uptake had been low. And I think certainly with the emphasis on kind of health and safety and the use of cash, we're seeing growth in digital financial payments, which is exciting as well, and again presents an interesting opportunity.
Yeah, and just to add, like from our perspective, I think there's multiple layers to this. One is so we are fully voluntarily funded, so like we are depending on donations as an accelerator so far, which means that the large funding or most of the funding we're getting is actually from government. So like we're actually grateful for donations from like the government of Germany, the United States, actually, Netherlands, UK, Belgium, and others, but then also foundations and individuals who have stepped up, and actually we have still increased our funding specifically also for innovations from our partners and donors who actually said, well, we are interested in supporting that because we believe now is the right time to invest. Now is when we need to move fast and actually in order to help people. So that's one element. The other element I think is true on the ground. So one of the other blockchain innovations that we've been supporting previously, it's called building blocks, for instance, just in the last 3 months has expanded, it was already serving 100,000 Syrian refugees in Jordan for cash payments, and it has just expanded to another 500,000 people, Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. And this just happened in the last 3 months while the pandemic was actually going on. Specifically also incorporating like social distancing measures and like how you access the blockchain wallets and so on. And as a side effect, the team even digitized camp access using the same blockchain. Because they actually, and they made this out of a necessity because of all of the paperwork and social distancing guidelines, that made the whole process a lot more efficient as a side benefit of having a blockchain system in place to actually use it.
Thank you so much. Bernhard, I was really grateful that you brought up building blocks. We had Megan Roberts on earlier from the UN Foundation, and she was talking about it, and I think it's such an incredible example of kind of a scaled blockchain solution, which we honestly don't have as many public examples of, and it's maybe a little bit unexpected that such innovation would come from within the UN, and I really would wish that other global bodies would be a little bit more maybe engaged in embracing some of these new innovations, because you just see how impactful they can be. And we only have about 5 minutes, but I want to address at least one of the questions we've gotten from the audience, which is, do you have any thoughts on how we might use blockchain to incentivize substitutes to livestock production, which is, of course, very resource intensive and contributes massively to global warming and coral bleaching? Any thoughts on that, Clara and Bernhard?
So I guess Bernhard, if you wanted to go, please go ahead.
No, I mean my answer would be like, think about a business model that ideally works without blockchain first, and then I think. And then as a second step, think about like specific advantages where distributed ownership or mismatch of trust can help you. I mean, I have a couple of other examples where we have explored blockchain applications before. Like I only encourage to use blockchain in particular where like you use some of the powerful benefits of blockchain for the particular use case. I can think of some like marketplace type transaction, like some solution that you could come up with, though I'm not sure if you actually need blockchain.
Thank you so much. And just 2 quick final questions. The first is, why blockchain? Why is that a tool that you found particularly effective? You have so many different technologies, and I understand, of course, they work in concert, but what sets blockchain apart as a tool that's particularly relevant to the challenges that you're hoping to address?
So I guess just to share a few thoughts, I think from our side, we're still testing that. I know this is a blockchain event, but I think definitely, to Bernhard's point, it's about building the model and then seeing where the technology fits, not starting with the technology. The areas that we're really interested to test in the prototyping phase where we do see opportunities. So one is around the potential of blockchain to support the aggregation of sales transactions from multiple farmers collectively. there's really interesting functionality that blockchain offers around the decentralization model that I think is quite consistent with the cooperative structure that we're looking to test. So I think that's one. The other exciting area, I think, is then the preservation of the data on the blockchain and the opportunities there. I think for us, a lot of the time, data systems, they're extracting data from smallholders to be used in many different formats, consumer communications on traceability, etc., and not necessarily thinking about the integrity of the data and the ownership of the data by the smallholders. So for us, that piece is also very interesting. Whether or not blockchain offers, kind of the moonshot solution, we're still waiting to hear that. But certainly we're really keen that we're a second example of scaling. So hopefully it does.
Yeah, and just to add, I would say I always encourage everybody, if people want to work on a blockchain solution, is really why. So the question is super relevant, and typically it would revolve around questions of does it help you to have distributed ownership? Is it better to do this? Is it better to be built for collaboration? Is it better to actually have a record that cannot be altered, and questions like that? And this was also the starting point for building blocks in our case, where the initial idea that Human Haddad, our finance manager, he had that idea and submitted to our accelerator. His idea was, I want to make our cash transfers better, more collaborative, more accountable, more transparent, and as a side benefit, we now save 98% of the banking fees, but it's a side benefit that we never had planned for. And I just want to say, if it hadn't been for better collaboration between different UN agencies, NGOs, that was the perfect example of what he had actually planned to do. And I think there's a lot of powerful application where blockchain, it's just built for collaboration, where yes, you could also use a centralized platform, but then you always go into who owns this, and you actually just can avoid and there's a couple of other use. I could go on for hours, but I'm stopping now. But there's lots of ideas that can only be effective.
Well, I'm very grateful to have people who are really focused on problems and then identifying what the ideal tools to solve them are, as opposed to, of course, going the other way around, which is where we often find problems. And so it's really encouraging to speak with both of you. And just kind of to round things out, I'd love to hear, in an ideal world and situation, what the outcome of the pilot would look like and what your work would look like moving forward.
So recognizing that the circumstances are really challenging at the moment for farmers with COVID in Peru. Ultimately, I think what's really key for us is that the only reason that female farmers are going to engage with this prototype while things are so challenging in Peru is if it delivers critical value to their livelihoods in the short term. And so for us, the prototype development is scheduled to go through until the end of the year. And if female farmers are engaged and excited and using the prototype, and we're evidencing improvement of incomes when circumstances are so challenging and their priorities are their families and feeding them, then I think, for us, that in this context is success. Beyond this year, we're really excited to then be able to broaden out and test the prototype more broadly with our network of partners in Peru. We work with over 50,000 smallholders in Peru, and also continuing the collaboration with WFP in Peru as well. I know their school feeding program is extensively rolled out across Peru. And so if we have the opportunity to work together moving forwards and scale, that would be fantastic success for us.
Yes, and from my perspective, our core mission is to, and I guess in startup or tech language, I would say we're looking for social impact unicorns. We're looking for startups that can positively impact the lives of not 1,000, not 10,000, but potentially millions of people. And this is what we're really looking for. What are these innovations and startups that can do this? And so I think by the end of what we call in our sprint, what we'd be looking for is is there positive, have we tested blockchain can actually help us get on that trajectory? And can this be a solution that helps potentially millions of people increase their incomes. And because it's blockchain, it should be fairly transparent if that happened or not. And I think this is also where I'm very excited about technology type or enabled solutions, because they allow us to test and iterate on certain topics that otherwise you would need to really manually gather data, and you actually don't know whether things work. With a digital solution such as blockchain, you know whether it's going to work. And I'm hopeful that this will be one of those solutions that has the potential to be one of our social impact unicorns.
Well, thank you both so much. It really is kind of a dream scenario for me to be able to come back and get a project update. And I hope perhaps a year from now we can gather in person for another status update. And I just want to thank you both so much for the work you're doing and for taking the time out of your very, very busy lives to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.